My name is Vresh Talnor, and for 11 cycles I commanded the assessment garrison on the border shelf above Corin's Reach, where we tested anything new the war brought us before it went to the front. I am telling this from memory, not from the official record, because the official record is wrong in the one place that matters. We had taken the human on a boarding action that should not have succeeded, a transport raid against a relay convoy, 11 of his unit dead or scattered, him alone holding a cargo lock against a breach team for longer than the lock should have held. By the time we pulled him out, he had a fractured wrist, 2 cracked ribs, and a head wound dried down one side of his face like a second uniform. He did not look like a weapon. He looked like a man waiting, patiently, for someone to tell him where to sit. I had him brought to the demonstration arena because that is where new variables get measured before anyone writes a doctrine around them. The arena is simple. A circular floor, a transparent containment ring, tiered seating for the assessment board, instrument arrays along the wall that log impact force, recovery time, vital signs. We had run thousands of subjects through it. The protocol was always the same. Apply graded physical stress, log the threshold at which the subject stays down, write the number, move to the next case. The board that day was 7 officers, including myself, and Fleet Adjutant Sayer Bemuth, who did not believe humans were worth the floor space. He said so, in the room, before we began. Another fragile thing that will collapse at the second strike and waste our morning. I told him to watch the third strike instead. I had read the medical intake. I did not yet know why I'd said it. We began at the standard calibration. A trained handler, not a torturer, an assessor, there is a difference and I insist on it even now, delivered a controlled strike to the human's already fractured ribs. By every chart on our wall, by every species we had logged, that strike puts a subject on the floor and keeps them there for the mandatory recovery interval. The human went down. The room noted it, satisfied, expecting the protocol to close out in the usual 3 minutes. He was back on his feet at 1 minute 4. Not standing well. Not standing straight. One arm wrapped instinctively around the ribs, breath coming in short pulls, but upright. Weight balanced. Eyes already finding the handler again before the handler had finished stepping back. Sayer Bemuth made a small sound, not quite a laugh, and called for strike 2. Strike 2 was harder, aimed lower, into the already fractured wrist as the human raised it to guard. The crack of it carried through the containment glass. He folded around his own arm and went down hard enough that the floor sensors logged a force reading the instrument crew flagged as inconsistent with their own equipment. They thought it had glitched. It hadn't. He had simply hit the floor like something with real mass. I watched the recovery clock instead of the readout. 40 seconds. He was sitting up, favoring the wrist, breathing through his teeth in a rhythm I have since learned humans use specifically to manage pain without losing the thread of a thought. 90 seconds. He was standing. Nobody in that room said anything for several seconds. Even Sayer Bemuth had gone quiet, which from him is its own kind of alarm. We escalated past the standard ceiling, which the protocol does not normally permit, but the board voted to continue because by then it was no longer a calibration exercise. It had become the only interesting thing any of us had seen in 11 cycles. Strike 3 broke something in his leg. The whole room heard it, and it should have ended the test under any humane reading of our own rules. He went down and stayed down for nearly 4 minutes, the longest interval of the morning, and I remember thinking, with something like relief, that we had finally found his floor. Then he used the containment rail to pull himself upright on one leg, because the other would no longer carry weight, and he stood there facing the handler again, swaying, with an expression that held no anger in it at all. It was almost apologetic. As though he were sorry for taking so long to get back to his feet, as though that, the delay, not the injury, was the failure he was answerable for. Enough, I said. And I said it before I had decided to. Not because the data was complete, because I did not want to find out what it would take to make the apology stop appearing on his face. Sayer Bemuth did not argue. I want that on this record, because it is the part the official transcript leaves out. He simply sat very still, watching the human balance one-legged against the rail, and said nothing at all, which from a man who had announced his contempt for the species an hour earlier, told me more than the instrument readings did. Afterward, in the medical bay, while the surgeons set the leg and the wrist and asked him through the translator why he had kept rising when the protocol clearly expected him to remain down, he said something I have repeated to every recruit class I have briefed since, though I no longer use it the way I once intended, as a curiosity to file, rather than a warning to carry. He said, "Down isn't a place, it's just where I was on the way back up. We wrote the number anyway, because that is the job. Threshold of incapacitation, recorded as indeterminate, exceeds protocol ceiling, subject self-terminated test by request of assessing officer. My numbers are not what I carry out of that arena. What I carry is the picture of a one-legged man holding a rail he had no reason to trust, facing a handler twice his mass, with his weight already shifting forward onto the leg that didn't work, because in whatever architecture sits behind a human's eyes, getting hit harder had never once been mistaken for an instruction to stop. I have since read every file we hold on his species' military history, and the pattern repeats with an evenness that should be impossible. Soldiers who fight on past the point where every other species we have catalogued would have ended the engagement honorably, units that hold ground for hours after the doctrine says the position is untenable, prisoners who keep working an escape plan through injuries that would have any of my own soldiers requesting transfer to the infirmary roster. It is not recklessness. Recklessness has a ceiling. This does not appear to have one we have found. Sayer Baymouth retired from active assessment work the cycle after that test. He told me once, much later, over a drink neither of us needed, that what unsettled him was not the leg, or the wrist, or the ribs. It was the apology on the man's face when he stood. He looked sorry for making us wait, Sayer said, not for losing, for the delay. I think about that arena floor more than I think about any battle I have actually fought. We build our doctrine on thresholds, the point at which a thing stops, so we know how hard to hit it and be done. The humans simply never agreed to have one, and they never told us. We had to find it out the hard way, one strike at a time, watching a man stand back up off a broken leg, as though standing were not an achievement at all, only the next obvious thing to do. We do not run that protocol the same way anymore. We no longer assume a recovery interval. We no longer call it a floor. There is a postscript to this, and I include it because the assessment board would leave it out if I let them. 3 cycles after the test, the human was transferred under an exchange agreement brokered far above my rank, the kind of arrangement that moves people like cargo and asks no one in the arena what they think of it. Before the transport took him, I went down to the holding block myself, which a commandant does not ordinarily do, and asked him, through the translator, whether he held anything against us for the test. He thought about it the way humans do when a question actually matters to them. He said no, that he'd seen worse done by his own side to people who'd done nothing to deserve it, and that what we'd run him through at least had a kind of honesty to it. We wanted to know what he was. We hadn't pretended otherwise. I asked him what he was. Then, since the test had told me only what he wasn't a subject who recognized a floor, wasn't built to read broken as a stopping condition. He said he didn't know either, not really. Said his whole life he'd just been someone who got back up. A fact about himself he'd never had to think about until a room full of strangers built a chart trying to measure it. He said the only thing that had scared him in that arena wasn't the strikes. It was watching us write the timer down to the second, like getting up, was the unusual part, the thing worth logging, instead of just the only thing left to do. We catalog thresholds because a threshold is something we can plan around, hit past it, and the matter is settled. The human's file settled under a category we don't possess. Not unbreakable, he broke plenty that morning, in ways the medical reports still describe in clinical detail, but broken and finished are, for them, 2 separate words, and they will not let you collapse the distance between them. I command a different garrison now, and I still run new variables through the arena when the war hands them to me. I have changed one line in the standard intake form. It used to read, record subject's recovery threshold. It now reads, record whether the subject has one. For every species we logged before this war, the answer has always, eventually, been yes. We have not yet found a human for whom it is.